3 days before Yom Kippur. Really?
That looks good.
Somebody else told me that if you take a caffeine,
Yeah, that's right. I did too. No headache.
No headache. I was concentrate 100%.
Yeah,
The whole day.
I did the same. I
I
did
didn't want to get to sleep at night.
I presume you mean cola.
Yeah, he means blow. Okay, let's go. So just a couple of short pieces. Rav l'talmido lehefich ksherim lahayid zeh al zeh. A rebbe can testify for a student and vice versa. Nashim ne'emanim be'edus tam besulim. Women's testimony is acceptable if regarding their nida status as far as what they saw, what they didn't see. That actually, shilas come up all the time regarding that. Mitavech kol od lo kibel schar sirsuro, an agent, like a broker, so long as he has not received his brokerage fee, o afilu kfar gava, ela shahalokecho hamocher ba levatel hamekach beizatainas, or if he's already collected his brokerage fee. In either event, if either the seller or the buyer wants to cancel the transaction, and because they have various different arguments to legitimately cancel the transaction, so they want to cancel the transaction, and the agent wants to testify that the deal went through. Ein mekabel meidu, so he's not a kosher witness, right? Dahavi nogeya beidus yesh lo hanoas mama, because he's a party of interest. In other words, in trying to establish I once had a based in case. I was brought in to help consult with a guy. It was a multi-million-dollar case, and the based in ruled against him based on the testimony of a guy who was a party of interest, and I was able to successfully argue that he was a party of interest. So they had a retrial of the case, the only thing that you can do is that if it's clear that there was din maruma, if there was some kind of corruption or some kind of misjudgment, if you can convince the dayanim that there was a misjudgment, you can bring it back to them. I don't know that you can take it to a different. You can't take it to a different beis din, but you can. No, there's no like Supreme Court. But what you can do is you can bring it back to the same beis din and demonstrate to them that they made an error in their judgment. An honest beis din will actually rehear the case. But that's a big assumption, that every beis din is gonna do that. A lot of times, what they did are people sitting on the beis din do not do this as their primary occupation. So it's very difficult to get the attention of dayanim. Even dayanim who want to be responsible and want to do the right thing, which is usually the case. But the problem is that they have their own lives and they only do this on a part-time basis. And so it's very hard sometimes to get them to really attend to the details of the case. Anyway, that's a separate. No. In Eretz Yisrael, people are hired as their full occupation to sit on batei.
So it's used like a voluntary, so they don't get paid.
They do get paid. Yeah, they
But
do.
it's not their only job.
But yeah, sure, you have to pay an hourly fee. The problem is that, let's say I was called upon to be part of a beis din. It would be very hard for me to focus my attention on the case for a week, 2 weeks, whatever time it takes, because I have a congregation. Most other rabbanim, they're, are maybe not as busy as perhaps I am, but they are busy. Anyway, so, okay. Rashai Adam lahachrin beveis hakneses al kol misha yodea lo edus sheyavo b'yayid. Now, let's say a person knows that there are people in his community who are capable of testifying, but let's say they're intimidated and they haven't stepped forward. A guy can clap on the bima, make a public announcement and saying, anyone who can testify on my behalf and doesn't is hereby placed under cherem. V'yachol, whatever that's worth. V'yachol Omar, here, give him a cookie and get him away, send him on his way, as Don Rickles would say. V'yachol Omar b'lashon cherem o shvua, and you can say, I hereby adjure you. That means like I demand that you come forward. Kol mi v'chem sheyodea. Any one of you that knows testimony, or fil lefarid yechidim, you can even say, Yankel, Beryl, Shmerel. I know that you know. I know that you know the truth. Aval ein lahashbian beveisten bifnei atzman lahaskikan sheyomer harianu mekablim aleinu ba'ola ushvua she'enanu yodim lo edus zeh. The only thing is that we don't make them swear in Beis Din that they do not know testimony. That's not something that I guess is done anymore. You can't coerce people to come to Beis Din to swear that they don't know testimony. But Beis Din does have final discretion. If the Beis Din sees that there's some kind of shtick going on here, because perhaps everyone refuses to testify, there's some collusion here, so then they can, at their discretion, even force people to take a shvuah. Yesh Omer, and of course, as you know, we don't give shvuahs. That's standard practice today. Some started sometime in the 19th or 20th century, but they do not impose shvuahs anymore. Yesh Omer kishenostin cherem be'edus afa krovim tzrichim lahayid va'afilu baldavar ba'atzma tzarich lahayid v'yesh cholkin. When a person imposes such a cherem publicly, some say that even if you're a relative or a party of interest and you would normally be exempt, you still have to volunteer to come forward to Beis Din because of this cherem that has been imposed. And others disagree. Well, Beis Din sends a hazmana. They send a hazmana to the litigants. Yeah. A Beis Din, as far as witnesses, I'm not 100% sure what I think that in the final analysis, if the Beis Din believes that a person has testimony and the person refuses to come to Beis Din, they could put a person in cherem. They could put a ban on a person because he knows testimony, but I've never seen it happen in real life. Okay. Chayiv lahayid, ein Imrei Yaakov divrei amaschol bedavar, shim kavash eduso chayiv bedinei shamayim. We mentioned in the Imrei Yaakov that if a person neglects to testify when he knows testimony, he cannot be held liable bedinei adam, in a mortal court, but God will hold him liable bedinei shamayim. Now he says, I have a general question, regarding any time that we've talked about a person being chayiv only b'dinei shamayim, whether that whole concept applies to a youth who's under 20 years old. Because we know that, the difference between 13-year-old and 20-year-old, both of those ages are listed in halacha as far as when you become a legal adult. So we normally think that a person is a legal adult at 13. And yet there are other places in Chazal where 20 is mentioned and biblically also, Miben Esrim Shana Hamala, 20 years old, for counting. So why do we have two dates? So Chazal say, I don't remember where they say it, but they say that 13 is the age that you're chayiv b'dinei adam, that as a member, you become a member of the society, of the community, and therefore whatever you do that impacts the social structure, you're going to be liable for. So if you are a 14-year-old kid and you steal, you're legally responsible for that. Right? But recognizing that a person does not really become an adult until 20, right? As far as really becoming mature, or that's when you start. I know some people who,
It's a process.
yeah, it's a process. That's right. So so you're chai b'dinei adam when you're 13, and chai b'dinei shamayim when you're 20. So in other words, that's when God holds you liable. So it turns out that for age, you become chai b'dinei adam before you're really held responsible in a heavenly court. So therefore, he says, based on that, how can we really say that if a person is chayiv pater b'dinei adam and chayiv b'dinei shamayim, that any of that would even apply to someone who's 14 years old or 15 years old? So it's a gray area. He just leaves it off with a tzarechia. He doesn't have resolution on this matter. Okay. Yeah. Yes. As a matter of fact, for Hilchos Nedarim, you can even be 12 years old as long as the Beis Din is satisfied with your intelligence. There are times when I'm not sure if that applies to Eidos or not. I don't know. Okay. Talmud Chacham sheyodea Eidos lechavero. Utuvao sheyoed lo lifnei Beis Din katan mimenu bechachma. Let's say you have a Talmud Chacham who has testimony to offer on a case, and he's been summoned to testify at a Beis Din that is lesser than him in knowledge. In other words, it's beneath his dignity to appear before a group of rabbis who are, let's say you have a great Rosh Yeshiva, and he's summoned to the Poughkeepsie Beis Din, whatever. I don't think there is a Beis Din in Poughkeepsie, but if there, Poughkeepsie, New York, you've never heard of Poughkeepsie? It's like, or let's say, like Yehuppetsville. Yeah. And there's a Jewish community in Poughkeepsie, believe it or not. It's very, very small. The rabbi in Poughkeepsie. It's a fine person. I'm just saying, just like one of these small town Batei Din, right? So it's beneath his dignity to appear before this particular junior Beis Din. Ugenailo leilech etzlam imhu edus mamon ein serach leilech ulaha'id. He says if it's a financial matter, he's not obligated to go to appear before the junior Beis Din. Ki aseh shel kavod Torah adif mehatzalas mamon chavera. Because the mitzvahs aseh of giving kavod to a Torah scholar trumps the obligation to save someone's financial loss. Elaheim yishlechu lo gimel anashim lebeso v'yod bifneihem. So instead, what should be done is that a delegation should be sent to the Rosh Yeshiva, and 2 witnesses will hear his testimony. See, today this would not be an issue. Just put him on Zoom, right? And then solve the problem, right? But so he should testify in front of 2 witnesses. Aval im yesh be'edu zud sad hafrasha me'isr chayev leilech ulahayid she'ein chachma ve'ein tfuna neged Hashem. But if this testimony involves tzad hafrasha, that you can prevent someone from performing or doing something that's usher, so then even you can summon and coerce, compel a Rosh Yeshiva to show up even at a lesser court, because when it comes to making sure that there's no chilul Hashem, that you're not disgracing Hashem's name by allowing an isser to take place, then we don't worry about honor to a great Torah scholar, because God's honor is more important than any human being's honor, even the greatest Rosh Yeshiva. So this was, this pasuk is a very important pasuk. Whenever a chilul Hashem is being made, you don't worried I need to defer to the honor of Rabbi so-and-so. It's one of the reasons why I got into, I did not win friends when I put out that letter with Rabbi Strauchler like a year and a half ago. We said it's a chilul Hashem. The schools are staying open and pretending that they're closed, and it's a lie. And the government knows about it, and the neighbors know about it, and it's wrong. Schools should stay closed until the end of the school year, right? And people were very upset because, who are we to challenge, very, very significant rabbinic leaders that are within the city? And the answer is this very same pasuk. Rambam says it. When it comes to a chilul Hashem, you have to be more concerned about Hashem's honor than you are concerned about any human being's honor. And you don't have to abide by any kind of protocol to consult or to defer. You have to do the right thing. Yeah. Well, listen, I guess everyone has their own definition of chilul Hashem. Yeah. Right. Okay. Thank you. Ezrat Hashem. No. I don't find this to be like a lashon hara kind of thing. It was a machlokas l'shem shamayim, but the justification for our, having the chutzpah to make this kind of public statement was based on this idea of ein chachma vein tfuna neged Hashem, that you can't say I'm a chacham or I'm a person of great discernment if Hashem's honor, and therefore I don't have to do something, or you have to abide by my authority if Hashem's honor is at stake. Okay, so let's go to Sif Katan Tesvav. Based in Katan Mimenu B'chachma, if the Bastin is of a lesser stature, right, in wisdom. So we're talking about a case where all of the members of the Bastin are inferior in stature to the person who knows to the testimony. But let's say one of the dayanim on the Bastin is of equal stature to the person who knows testimony. And even though the other two are of lesser stature, he still has to go to testify. The Chachma, they are of lesser stature and wisdom. Dafka b'Chachma. This only applies to being inferior in wisdom. But just because they're younger, group of young rabbanim, and they want to summon an elder rabbi, he still has to go because he can't make the argument, I know more than you guys. The ha'ikr hu kavod haTorah, because the main issue is kavod haTorah, the honor to the Torah. Kevin shahabestin chachamim hem yoser mimenu apshu zaken mahim v'hu gam chacham. He says, since the Bastin is a very learned Bastin, perhaps even more than he is, just because he's older than them and wise is not an excuse for him to not appear. Mikol makom tzarich leilech. Mikol makom nira shehakol lefi mashu v'atalmid chacham hazaken v'abeis hakaton mimenu b'shanim. But a lot of it will depend on the specific circumstances. She'im hatalmid chacham hazaken v'muflag b'zikna legabi abeis hakaton mimenu b'shanim. If he truly is a distinguished elder statesman in the community, and the Bastin is a very young Bastin, they're not as distinguished in wisdom, but perhaps they have more book knowledge than him. So you understand there's different kinds of wisdom, he's basically saying. So then in that kind of situation, he would be considered to be their superior and could argue that I'm the elder statesman of the community, even though you may know more than me in this particular area of halacha because you studied longer than I have, but I still have greater stature. He's referring to Yeah, yeah. It means that they're inferior to him, to his stature, and therefore he cannot be required to be subservient to that beis din, right? Every beis din is three rabbis. We don't have higher courts and lower courts today. Okay. Ugenailo leilech etzlam. It's considered to be degrading for him to appear before them. Mashma dafka b'chi haygavna dehu begetter ginai. It seems that it's only when it's degrading for him, it's beneath his dignity. Aval lifa'amim gam imhu adif mehem b'chachma ma'at. Aval eno begetter ginai de'az chayv leilech b'chol gavna. But sometimes he may be of greater wisdom than they, but it's not considered to be degrading for him to appear before them. Gam beleka afrushim eisura. Says because in that kind of situation, maybe everyone's friends, and he happens to be older, but there's nothing embarrassing for him to appear before the beis din. So then he has every obligation to go. I mean, this would be the argument that he would have to give after receiving a summons, and he would have to tell them, "I'm sorry, Chevra, it's beneath my dignity to appear before you." It sounds really nice, right? Right. Based on knowledge. Yeah.
With the same courtesy be extended to say somebody of status. Say you had to call the prime minister for somebody of a high office. I mean, would that be?
Yeah. So he said if a person's an elder statesman, yeah. I mean, assuming that the prime minister is a yid, and it's an Orthodox Jew.
No. A cousin who was a miracle. So would you call him the beis din? There's a status. I mean,
right. So it might be that you have to send a couple of guys to get his testimony, or have him appear via Zoom, right? It could be. It could be that might fall in this category. That's right. That's right. Okay. Ein sarich leilech.
You have the Rosh Yeshiva who someone said found we did something wrong, and you let it go and take them publicly.
A lot of it will depend on the circumstances. There are times, this really goes into the social concerns of a Jewish community. There are times, when a rabbi has to just be very quietly defrocked and just sent out of town. I saw this film. What was it called? With Seymour Hoffman. What was his? And with Meryl Streep. It was a movie about a convent. I think it was called Sin or Guilt, something like that. And it was about this priest who the mother superior of this little Boston church, felt was guilty of molesting one of the choir boys. She didn't have any hard evidence, and the whole film is about that whole idea. But basically, what the Catholic Church used to do is they just used to ship them somewhere else. Right. So obviously that should never be tolerated. But there are circumstances where you want to defrock someone without creating a big disgrace, as long as you make sure that the guy never serves in any capacity like that ever again. I know there are cases like that. This Chaim Walder case was a disaster, because not only was there an effort to suppress information, testimony from girls who had come forward, but he was never dethroned from his position of popularity and power, and so that was the community that allowed this to happen is just as guilty as in many respects as he was. And so, wow. Okay. But there are other times when a guy says, okay, I know I'm guilty. I'm leaving the rabbinate. You'll never hear from me again. Just from the sake of my wife and my kids, don't publicly flog me. Don't publicly humiliate me. So you let him leave quietly. He goes off into the sunset and you never hear from him again. Well, it depends, but part of it is you don't want to demoralize the whole community. This, man of authority that they looked up to and respected. A lot of people place their religious stock in an individual, and then it turns out to be that he's got these major problems. You have to take into consideration whose neshamas am I shattering in the process, right?
So there's no punishment. The only punishment is that he has to just leave his job, but whether he lived for so many years, Hashem will take.
Yeah, and listen, there could be that one of his victims will file criminal charges against him at some point. That's something else, or Hashem will take care of it. We're not here to right every wrong. We know that we can't. We know that Hashem is in charge of the world. Okay. Ein sarach leilech ulahayid. The great Rosh Hashiva does not have to go and testify before the lesser Beis Din. Imrotza leilech v'limchol al kavodo rashai, dechacham shemachal kavodo kavodo machal. But if he wishes to be moichel on his kavod, he has every right to do so. In other words, there's nothing wrong with a great Rosh Hashiva saying, I'll go to the Poughkeepsie Beis Din. I like they're nice little boy chicks, and I'll just take a little trip and I'll go there. Okay, but if not, then Yishluchu Gimel Lo Gimel Anashim. They should send 3 men to the place, to the residence of the Rosh Hashiva, and take his testimony there. Perish Gimel Anashim Dahavi Beis Din Beis Din Moser LeBeis Din. Basically, you're creating an ad hoc Beis Din, which is assigned by the other Beis Din to go and hear. So he says it's a Beis Din. Right. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So it's not, you're right, because he says you got to send 3. Avol shnayim lo mishum dahavi aid mi pi aid. But you can't just send 2, because then it would be hearing testimony from well, you have to hear testimony from the person with the knowledge himself. You can't have an aid mi pi aid, one witness hearing testimony from another witness. It's got to be directly from the person who has firsthand knowledge. Well, yeah, but the Beis, right? But a Beis Din, the mechanism of Beis Din works differently. They're not presenting testimony as witnesses. They're basically ruling that based on this man's testimony, this is what should happen. Or they present the information from one Beis Din to another. Imlo b'makom sheyesh takana shehatzibur tiknu b'neim sheshlucheim yikablu edus. There are, however, circumstances where if a community comes to consensus and they say that we will allow 2 people to go and accept testimony from this person, and that's the convention, then sometimes it is acceptable. And then you can follow that rule. Some say that in all situations you don't need 3; that 2 will suffice. Because since you're going through the proxyship of the Beis Din, it's not called aid BP aid, one witness to another witness, but you're basically a representative of the Beis Din, like you were suggesting, Doug, and therefore they can come back and report to the Beis Din their findings. So it's a machlokus whether you need 2 or 3. Okay, and then finally. Correct. Last thing, well, then we'll finish. An example of where a person must testify, even if he's a great Rosh Hashiva, is, let's say the Beis Din want to allow a woman to remarry. She's an aguna. We don't know if her husband died. And this Rosh Yeshiva knows that he's still alive. He has to go and testify. He can't say, well, it's my honor. Some people say that if you can prevent someone from taking a shvua, that too will also will obligate even a Rosh Yeshiva to go and testify. But that's not clear, and we'll hold it here for today. Have a wonderful Shabbos, everybody. Have a nice little break. We're going to take off for the holiday of Sukkot. Right after Sukkot is over, Sukkot ends on a Wednesday, I believe, so we can have a Thursday and Friday together. And then I'm going Tuesday. So we'll start Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We'll learn that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then I go out of town for a week. So we'll have a couple of. I'm going to Poughkeepsie. Right?